While the political debate over the carbon tax has raged in Canberra this week, scientists have been meeting in Darwin to discuss how human-induced climate change will affect the Northern Territory, and their forecast is pretty grim. Most agree there'll be stronger cyclones, wetter wet seasons, and pristine parts of the top end will be inundated with salt water. But one academic sees an opportunity for Northern and Central Australia. Professor Andrew Campbell is the director of the Research Institute of Environment and Livelihoods at Charles Darwin University, and I spoke to him earlier today. Professor Campbell, welcome to 7:30 NT.
Thanks, James.
You've been at a conference for the past 3 days discussing climate change and some of the different ways we can prepare for it. What sort of a future do you think the Northern Territory has in developing renewable energy?
I think the NT is very well placed. This could potentially be a renewable energy powerhouse. One of the constraints we have is the size of our own market. The Darwin market, the Darwin-Katherine grid is fairly modest in size. But if we think bigger about export to 500 million people to our north and potentially linking to an East Coast grid too, then the NT could be have a very significant large-scale renewable energy future.
So by a renewable energy future, you're talking about building wind plants, solar plants, geothermal energy. Is that sort of the idea?
A mix. I think certainly up here in cyclone-prone areas, I don't think there'll be too many wind farms, but we have a massive solar energy resource, some of the highest areas of solar radiation hitting the earth. And we also have potentially a bit longer term but very large scale geothermal resources under that area around Katherine, and potentially we have very significant tidal energy resources off the north coast as well.
But that renewable energy future you're talking about isn't happening at the moment. I mean, at the moment successive governments have been looking at mines and more recently even possibly large dams around the top end. What do you think of those sorts of proposals?
The Territory is fortunate in that at the moment our dominant energy source is gas, which is admittedly significantly cleaner than coal, but it is still a fossil fuel and it will run out at some stage. So we need to be planning for an energy future that goes beyond gas and that eventually moves us away from gas. We should be thinking about how we use the revenues from gas to position ourselves for the very long term. As for the proposal that we're going to feed 120 million people by damming the rivers of Northern Australia, I think there is a significant future for more irrigation here in the north, but not by damming rivers and having large-scale schemes like the Ord.
It's very hot and humid at the moment in the top end. I'm actually starting to sweat a little bit now. But what can Territorians expect the weather to be like in 10, 20, 30 years' time with climate change?
The best available science suggests that things are going to get warmer, that our wets are going to get a little bit wetter. Potentially, in terms of heat, we currently have 10 or 11 days a year above 35 degrees Celsius. We're looking at that going up more than 50 days a year by about 2030. So that impact on heat stress will be significant. Probably the biggest two impacts, though, will be, although we'll have fewer cyclones, we'll have a higher proportion of Category 4 and 5. So of extreme storm events, their intensity is likely to increase of the order of 60%. And the other one is sea level rise. The seas around Northern Australia are rising faster than anywhere else in the continent, around 7 mils per year. And if that accelerates, as some scientists are now thinking it will, with the melting of the ice caps, then we're potentially looking at very big impacts in Kakadu National Park and our other lowland wetlands and floodplains.
Of course, climate change has been well and truly on the agenda in Canberra this week, and it now does look as though the country will get a carbon tax and then possibly an emissions trading scheme. A lot of local politicians and business groups wanted the Northern Territory completely exempt from any new tax or any new carbon scheme. Do you think that would have been a good idea?
I actually see more upside in this package for the Territory than downside. People need to remember that this fixed price period, the price only applies to 500 firms nationally that are generating more than 25,000 tonnes of emissions. Only 10 of those firms are wholly located within the Territory, and the others would be mainly multinational mining companies. It doesn't apply to households, it doesn't apply to fuel, it doesn't apply to small business unless you're emitting more than 25,000 tonnes. So I would think for the vast majority of people in the Northern Territory, they would mainly be beneficiaries of the package.
Any action that ultimately is taken on climate change seems like it's going to cost something, and recent polls show a lot of people aren't really prepared to pay for that. Given that and some of the recent very vigorous political debate, I suppose you'd call it, are you optimistic about the future of the Northern Territory?
If we do it in smart ways, if we make the shift off fossil fuels to more renewable energy, if we develop truly territorial lifestyles in terms of house design, the way we use water, the way we roll out new urban and suburban developments, I think if we grow a lot more of our own food, but in and around our population settlements, then we can be at the front end of a very exciting century of innovation.
Professor Andrew Campbell, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.